President Trump, his most vocal supporters, aka the trumpets, Republicans, the Federal Reserve, the mainstream financial media, they have all been lying about this economic recovery. Their claims that the economy is on fire in a good way, that it is booming, are lies. We just got more data out from the New York Federal Reserve yesterday, and this disproves them. This disproves the booming economy. So I'm going to read this article really quick. There was a Washington Post article about this. A record 7 million Americans are 3 months behind on their car payments, a red flag for the economy. A record 7 million Americans are 90 days or more behind on their auto loan payments, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported Tuesday, even more than during the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. Economists warn that this is a red flag. Despite the strong economy and low unemployment rate, many Americans are struggling to pay their bills. Those things don't... Okay, I added this part, but those things don't jive. Okay, back to the article. Quote, the substantial and growing number of distressed borrowers suggests that not all Americans have benefited from the strong labor market, end quote. Economists at the New York Fed wrote in a blog post. A car loan is typically the first payment people make because a vehicle is critical to getting to work, and someone can live in a car if all else fails. When car loan delinquencies rise, it is usually a sign of significant distress. This article used duress among low-income and working-class Americans. That was a Covfefe mistake. Then there's a link to another article within the article saying repo men are doing better than ever. I bet they are, but they have to carry around a loaded gun. I've seen that. I've heard repo men talk in interviews, so they are carrying around loaded weapons now because some people are like trying to kill them or come after them. Okay, back to the article. Quote, your car loan is your number one priority in terms of payment, end quote, said Michael Taiano, a senior director at Fitch Ratings. Quote, if you don't have a car, you can't get back and forth to work in a lot of areas of the country. A car is usually a higher priority payment than a home mortgage or rent, end quote. Not sure I fully agree with that now with Uber or Lyft. Depends where you live, but I could see. Cars are important, especially if you're dating someone, unless you live in a major city and you can use Uber or Lyft. Normally, if you're going on dates or work or something, especially if you're a real estate agent, people want to be picked up in the car. Okay, I added those parts. People who are 3 months or more behind, back to the article. People who are 3 months or more behind on their car payments often lose their vehicle, making it even more difficult to get to work, the doctor's office, or other critical places. The New York Fed said that there were over 1 million more, quote, troubled borrowers, end quote, at the end of 2018 than there were in 2010. I wonder if that's a typo in 2010, when unemployment hit 10% and the auto loan delinquency rate peaked. Today, unemployment is 4% and job openings are at an all-time high, yet a significant number of people cannot pay their car loan. Most of the people who are behind on their bills have low credit scores and are under age 30, suggesting young people are having a difficult time paying for their cars and their student loans at the same time. Auto loans surged in the past several years as car sales skyrocketed, hitting a record high in 2016 of 17.5 million vehicles sold in the U.S. Overall, many borrowers have strong credit scores and repay their loans on time, but defaults have been high among, quote, subprime, end quote, borrowers with credit scores under 620 on an 800-point scale. The share of auto loan borrowers who were 3 months behind on their payments peaked at 5.3% in late 2010. The share is slightly lower now, 4.5%, because the total number of borrowers has risen so much in the past several years. Still, economists are concerned because the number of people impacted is far greater now, and the rate has been climbing steadily since 2016, even as more people found employment. Experts warn Americans to be careful where they get their auto loan. Traditional banks and credit unions have much smaller default rates than, quote, auto finance, end quote, companies, just such as the, quote, buy here, pay here places, end quote, places on some car lots. Okay, so if you want to read the rest of the article, I will attach a link to it. And to add here, and this is not financial advice, but despite this data coming out from the New York Federal Reserve, we have two subprime auto loan companies. One is the Credit Acceptance Corporation, symbol CACC. That's Charlie Alpha Charlie Charlie. That stock has been in a very big uptrend since, since November of 2016. So it's gone from like $184 a share $166 a share got a low in November 2016-ish, up to $439.75 now. And the same thing, I think, for CarMax, which is another one. They sell used cars, but they also have a very big auto loan financing arm. I think a lot of subprime loans as well. So these two companies, their stocks actually, CAAC went up on the news today. It's up 1.16% despite these data points coming out. And, it seems they must have, this is just my theory here, they must have the world's best underwriters, because, or they're committing accounting fraud. So obviously don't trade on this. Shorting is dangerous, but it's really weird how we're seeing the data points coming out saying that the subprime auto loan defaults are rising, and the companies that are issuing the subprime auto loan debt, their stocks go up, and they're not reporting an increase in their delinquencies in subprime. So maybe they have the the world's best underwriters. That would be the non-crime way, or they have really good algorithms that do the underwriting. So maybe that would be the non-financial crimes, non-accounting fraud way for them to achieve those good low default rates of subprime auto loans, because the data saying the subprime auto loans are spiking. Okay, today also, this is going to be a short little live stream show. I mainly just wanted to talk about that today. Well, actually, yesterday, the U.S. debt clock, national debt's over $22 trillion. That is actually not the real number. Okay, heard another expert talk about this. I can't remember which one because I listen to so much content and read so many articles. But the U.S. government actually is hiding an extra $10 trillion off balance sheet because of the type of accounting they use that they can legally get away with, because they literally decide what's unlawful and lawful with accounting laws. So there's an extra $10 trillion off balance sheet. On top of, that's not counting the unfunded liabilities with Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, pension funds, etc. Government employee pension funds, etc. So just welcome to dystopia type of things. On a relative, people ask me this then, with the U.S.'s debt numbers, why isn't the U.S. in more trouble? And it's really on a relative basis. So in the short term, the U.S., like I've been saying for a long time on the podcast, the U.S. is being given a lot more rope to hang itself with in the long term. The market in the short term is far more worried about the European Union and emerging markets in China and some of the other problems going around the globe. Okay, eventually this extra rope that the U.S. is being given to hang itself with, and the U.S.'s debt has grown, I think in the last 12 months, it's up 1.1 trillion. So the claimed budget deficits that Trump was running were actually not the real numbers. It was actually a lot larger. And this is a danger with doing supply-side economics and tax cuts in an economy where the debt is already so large and debt to GDP is already so large. The only other time the supply-side economics were used in the Ronald Reagan administration, and I got in a big argument with Paul Craig Roberts about this about a year ago, but the only other time the massive supply-side economic stimulus was used with enormous tax cuts and running big deficits, the U.S.'s debt to GDP ratio was below 40%. Okay? So for the supply-siders, in the short term, this may look good. In the long term, we're being given way more rope to hang ourselves with. A lot more problems. And, talking about the government and accounting fraud, look at recently, just in the last couple months, the Pentagon failed an audit, and they knew they were going to fail the audit, and they admitted in a press release that they knew that they were going to fail the audit, and they said in the press release that it wasn't that big a deal, that they knew that they were admitting that they failed an audit because they already anticipated they were going to fail an audit. And yes, I intentionally said that all jumbled so you guys would laugh, because it's ridiculous. So Congress is broken. The government does accounting fraud. There's an extra $10 trillion off balance sheet debt that the U.S. government is not counting, in addition to the $22 trillion. But on a short-term basis, the market cares. The markets, financial professionals care more about the financial problems, economic landmines in other areas besides the U.S. Although the corporate bond market for the U.S. is a big, big problem, but we have not seen any other General Electrics yet. There will be, I know hedge fund managers like Kevin Duffy and others are out there looking for them, but we're actually seeing some Chinese companies with some big problems lately. So an article that I wanted to bring to your attention was earlier this week. I saw from, thanks to Louis Camersano at Small Gold. He brought this up. I missed it. 2 large Chinese borrowers missed bond payments. So from Bloomberg, I'll attach a link to that. China Minsheng investment bondholder said to not get paid. And then defaulter Wintime, which is another, said to miss debt payment milestone. And I also want to bring to your guys' attention, it was released on February 11th, so a couple days ago. And this is free over on Bloomberg. Kyle Bass, along with Daniel Babich, wrote a op-ed about the China-U.S. trade war and what he thinks Trump should do in terms of renegotiating a trade deal, and then also the debt problems in China and how bad they really are. So that's a free article. Kyle Bass is one of the brightest minds in finance. He is not always right. He obviously, I think, said that Japan was going to have an immense problem, and I think he predicted that China's RMB was going to have a big currency crisis already. So these timing things are tricky. Even if you're one of the smartest minds in finance, you're worth a lot of money, you manage a lot of money, because the governments and the central banks can change the rules. They figure out new ways to screw over the bond vigilantes or the hedge fund managers. And this is why the game is very tough. Even if you have a good long-term track record, go and listen to the interviews, recent ones over the last 6 months from Stanley Druckenmiller. There's a free one on Bloomberg, and in the Real Vision TV one, I think they even released that one for free from Stanley Druckenmiller. No one has a better long-term track record of managing money than Druckenmiller. And Druckenmiller, who's one of the, I think 30% annual compound average annual returns, so 30% per year for most of his career, he said there's no way he could get those numbers anymore. He said that's how difficult things are now because, and I added this part, because the governments and the central banks on the macro part are changing all the rules. There's interventions and everyone's changing the rules. Hello, Kirsten. I think Trump does listen to people, but unfortunately, and Victor Sperandio brought this up in his Real Vision TV interview, that Trump hires the wrong people. So you see Trump firing a lot of people because Trump often hires the wrong people. Okay, so I think that's pretty much about it that I wanted to talk about. So I think, this spin, this narrative from President Trump, the Federal Reserve, the mainstream financial media, that the correction in stocks is over. Stock market may go higher. There may be a melt up, but it's not going to be, and I've stressed this a lot, if the stock market does go higher, it's not going to be because of fundamental reasons. Now, you may hear on CNBC or Bloomberg that it's going higher because of fundamental reasons, but when we get data points out about this record amount of subprime auto loan, people not paying, people going to lose their cars, that just proves that they're grasping at straws for any little justification they can for why the stock market went higher. And that's what the CNBC and Bloomberg are doing now. Like I said, I listened to 20 minutes of Bloomberg radio last week, and in the 20 minutes, anything that was any piece of news from a company earnings announcement or a global macro announcement or about the Australian housing crisis, it was all... They must have paid someone, so I surmised that they maybe had like an intern do it, but they had to have someone smarter. Maybe it was an underpaid intern or something, an underpaid entry-level employee. But they spent time, like a serious amount of time, looking over a press release or news or information or data and coming up with a way to spin it as positively as possible before they announced it in public, either on the radio or on TV. Well, Kirsten... People listening to my podcast know it's not fundamentals for why the stock market's rising. It's going to be liquidity injections because, like I said, remember last week, I think I brought up on one of the live streams that the total global liquidity injections, which had been going down since March of 2018, over the last 2 months, they've started to go up a lot again. And that's not necessarily because of the Federal Reserve. That's because of the People's Bank of China had $83 billion injection in 1 month, over $83 billion. Of liquidity injections in 1 month, and there's no way all that liquidity that the PBOC injected all stayed in China. In fact, the more I learned about China, and I'm getting more Chinese sources, more people are emailing me about their experiences in China, that the more I hear about China, the more I understand how corrupt and crazy everything is over there. So it's more about liquidity injections, QE programs. But the mainstream financial media here in the United States, they do their best to try to lie to people, spin narrative that the stock market is rising for fundamental reasons. And that's the type of BS justification. I think you're even seeing like Jim Cramer now saying the stock market is rising for fundamental reasons and has nothing to do with quantitative easing or central bank intervention. Jim Cramer saying stuff like that. Josh Brown just put out a op-ed on his blog website, the popular one, Reform Broker. He's a hardcore Democrat, so he's a rich Democrat, and he's saying that share buybacks have destroyed the stock market. Well, why do you think these corporations were able to do share buybacks? Number one, the ratings agencies never downgraded their credit rating, so they were able to borrow a lot more than they should have been able to borrow without getting their credit downgraded, and there was a lot of extra assumptions there about growing revenues and growing earnings and free cash flow, stuff like that. But the other thing is the central banks have coordinated, the 5 or 6 largest central banks have just done, the publicly stated amount is like 21 trillion, their balance sheets have increased up to $21 trillion. But I mean, in actuality, Jim Rickards has said this too in the recent past, that the real number is like over at least $65 trillion in total liquidity in credit injections and, fiat currency injections. So money and credit. Fiat currency is not really money, but, the hedge fund managers and people on TV call it money. So my educated guess is about $65 trillion has been injected at least into the system since the 2008 financial crisis. Peter asks, what kind of Chinese sauces are you getting? Are they spicy or tasty? Oh, Peter, you're being funny. I'm my contacts, some people are just emailing me, so I'm not meeting people at, undisclosed Chinese restaurants, okay, buddy? Thai sauces. I've been to a couple decent Thai restaurants. The Thai food here in this area is only okay. There's a lot of Thai places, but a lot of them are pretty mediocre. Okay, well, I'm going to take a look at some listener questions and comments real quick, and then I'm going to shut it down. Because we're at 17 minutes. I didn't plan on doing anything long today. Welcome to the live stream, Prasanthi Girl. I think I pronounced that correctly. I know your real name, but you don't want me to say it. So you can email me later. Gus the Broken caught my stream, but you won't see what you're saying. Why won't I see what you're saying? Is it time to get bullish on what, Kirsten? On stocks? So if the trade, what's being spun now for a possible reason the stock market could go higher is the U.S.-China trade deal. But this trade deal, if you read the Kyle Bass piece, I encourage you, I'll attach a link to it in the information section when the show's over. And Kyle Bass basically says that Trump wants a win and that China needs a deal done before, I think, the next set of tariffs kicks in. Let me look at the article real quick. I think the next set of tariffs kick in sometime in March, the first week of March maybe. Says at the end of the article, March 1st. So basically there was a 90-day reprieve, and we're almost done with it for the next set of tariff increases, and China's going to get even more pain after March 1st. So basically China's trying to get something on paper, and Trump kind of wants some type of win, but this trade deal won't be really good because I think there's no way in hell China's going to agree to anything about intellectual property theft or not stealing like corporate espionage or not stealing research and development. There's just no way. Maybe like there would be a public announcement that they would try to crack down on it, but in reality, there's no way they would actually do anything. It's just too profitable for their corporations and their government to steal IP and research and development. It costs them almost no money to steal hundreds of billions of dollars from U.S. corporations, European corporations, British ones, Japanese ones, South Korean ones. Vibin Joseph, you just finished listening to the Denny McMahon book on China you recommend. Good one. Yes, I've heard very good things about it. It is one of the next book or two I'm going to read. I'm planning on getting to the Bitcoin Standard one. I did not read that one yet either. I heard it's very, very good. Kirsten, I think Trump does listen to people, but it may be the wrong people. From what I've heard, he listens a lot to Jared Kushner and to Ivanka. Those are the two main people he listens to first. And in a lot of situations, that's not always the best idea. Peter asks, Jason, do you see the U.S. devolving into some sort of civil unrest within the next 10 to 20 years if another 76 million illegals arrive like Trump wants? Trump wants illegals coming in? What are you talking about? Chicken wire fence instead of wall now. Okay, so I don't think Trump wants any of the 76 million illegals you're talking about, but yes, I do see the U.S. is on a very bad path over the next 10 to 15 years. Because of identity politics, tribalism, third and fourth wave feminism. There are parts of feminism that are good. The new parts of feminism are not so good. Okay, it's divide and conquer. I see tons of divisions increasing and escalation on race, class, gender, age. Because the age one, a lot of people are not talking about, but you have the baby boomers who own the assets, right? They own the retirement accounts in their 401ks and IRAs, the stocks, the bonds, the real estate. They have the assets. They don't want the asset prices falling. And then you have my generation, Generation X, and millennials and Generation Z. They can't afford any of the assets. So they would like the prices to fall so they can buy some assets. And the baby boomers need my generation and the younger generations to get jobs and pay into the system so the baby boomers can draw on their unfunded liabilities. So, your Social Security, your Medicare, your Medicaid. So at least in nominal terms, they can get some money out if they haven't already gotten it out. So I think, and a lot of people are not talking about this yet, I think we're headed for age warfare too. Not just class warfare, but age. So the entitlements haven't necessarily started to drastically kill the U.S. yet, but for that Ponzi scheme system to work, that is unfunded liabilities for Social Security, there has to be more workers paying in, and we're getting to that level where it's just the math's not going to work. There's a lot of people I know in my age demographic and younger who are trying to scrape together a life. They have enormous student loan debt payments, enormous payments on cars and rent and other things. They could barely afford anything. And, they're trying to scrape a life together on 2 or 3 jobs. Not sleeping. They're going to have health problems. I mean, they won't admit this in public at least, but their life's a mess. So there's a lot of problems coming. And I think they're going to get worse in the U.S. before they get better. I hope I'm wrong, but it does not look that way. Okay, guys, well, one more comment here. Ron Richards, Litecoin, Bitcoin, crypto is the future. Maybe some of the technology, but governments can start taxing you a lot more. So unless you're willing to leave a country because the country is going to tax away all your crypto, there's things that can get done. So some of you crypto guys leave money on an exchange, and look what happened to I forget the guy's, the exchange in Canada, but now they're alleging the guy may have faked his death. There's 190 million approximately dollars worth of crypto that no one but the founder of the exchange can get access to. So I would not put all my money into crypto. I have friends who have a lot of their savings in crypto. If you're going to speculate in crypto, okay. If you're going to have some diversification in crypto, okay. Again, this is not financial advice, but if you want to diversify into Bitcoin and then maybe speculate on a handful of some of these other cryptos, it might not be a bad idea. But if you put all your money in crypto and you don't know the technology, you don't have a Trezor device, you don't have multiple ways to protect yourself. But a lot of people I know who have a lot of money invested in Bitcoin have lost a lot of money in Bitcoin because they either forgot their password, there was a problem with a transfer, there was a problem with one of the wallet companies. So it's not fully perfect either. Plus governments, like I said, and this is rule number 1, governments can change the rules. How do we know if Bitcoin does not rally back to over $20,000 a coin if governments all of a sudden are going to start issuing windfall profits taxes? Gold and silver are buying and holding physical gold and silver metal is not tax advantaged. So you cannot lock in a 10% long-term capital gains tax rate like you can buying and holding a stock. So gold and silver, the metal, is already tax disadvantaged if you go to sell it. And on top of that, if gold and silver prices go through the roof, let's say we get over $5,000 an ounce gold, or over $10,000 an ounce gold, or over $100 an ounce silver, how do we know the government won't change the rules and issue like a 50, 60, 70, God forbid, even a 90% windfall profits tax in addition to the taxes that are already taxed on physical gold or silver? If you are an American, it is taxed as a collectible. So no tax advantages for selling any of your gold or silver whatsoever. How do we know then that the governments will not change the rules for Bitcoin and put a windfall profits tax on Bitcoin or crypto in the next rally in cryptocurrencies? We are already seeing, and this is my point here about diversification, and there are some libertarians out there that think that they are diversified if they own lots of rental properties in different cities and states. Okay, so they say, I am fully diversified just by owning a bunch of rental properties that are cash flow positive, that have high rent to value, good rent to value ratios. So they're cash flow positive, meaning that the rent that you're collecting each month is more than the mortgage payment, the property tax, the residential property manager you're paying for, all the other expenses that add in. So you're taking maybe $1,000 or $2,000 a month in positive cash flow on each rental property. But how do you know that in each city or state they won't impose rent control? They could try to get you on rent control. I think in Portland, either in the whole state of Oregon or Portland, the politicians, the hardcore Democrat, radical politicians there, a lot of them are socialists, probably rich champagne socialists, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, by the way, guys, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who had, I think, a 420 credit score before she won her congressional seat. I mean, she was like a deadbeat. She was barely able to pay any of her bills and all this stuff. And she comes here to D.C. with her congressional seat, $174,000 a year salary, and in barely like a month or so, she already just moved in. It was reported by the Free Beacon today. She has a $3,000 a month apartment in like a really nice area of DC right next to Nats Park in the Navy Yard. So she has like a $3,000 per month apartment. Her Green New Deal, right, because she's a hypocrite champagne socialist, she is not even taking the train, the metro, and then walking to work in Congress, which is only about a 15 or 20 minute walk after she takes the train. She is taking like a limo or a car, an internal combustion engine, and it was confirmed by her congressional staff. So when the Free Beacon did the story today, they confirmed it with her own congressional staff. She's using fossil fuels. Okay, these guys are all Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake hypocrites, champagne socialists. They're the ruling class. It's like the Politburo in the Soviet Union. But back to Oregon and Portland, in the last month or two, these crazy radical politicians in Portland, Oregon, and yes, there are some libertarians out there, I know a couple, and yes, I think marijuana is pretty legal out there, but almost everyone out there is hardcore radical Democrat. A lot of them are socialists and Marxists and communists out there, and the politicians know this, that people will vote for them if they promise this garbage, and they're talking about rent control. So if you're a rental property owner in Portland or other parts of Oregon, and you're hearing the politicians are thinking about approving rent control, you cannot pass along any price increases that you may have to pass along, and then you're risking, having negative equity. You might not even be able to pay the mortgage payments with rental property, with the rental property money you're collecting each month. So this is my whole point. Rule number one, the politicians, the central bankers, the bureaucrats, they can change the rules. They have the government on their side. They have the police, the military. They got the guns. Well, I think diversification is part of it. I mean, if you have a couple $100,000 minimum, this is not financial advice, but if you can afford a couple rental properties with a mortgage on them, cash flow positive, gold to silver, and some other diversification investments, I think that would be the best. Grumbles and Grumble says, if you pay rent equals morons. Grumbles. Most of the United States is a renter nation now. Almost all of Europe, almost all the European Union, Grumbles, is a renter nation. Almost no one in the European Union now owns their own house. I believe I read a statistic that less than 40% of citizens in the European Union own their own house now. So basically you're becoming a tenant, you're becoming a serf, a wage slave, or a debt serf. There's a new normal. Okay, well, that's it for now. We're at 30 minutes, so I'll see you guys later. I'm going to work on some more stuff for the rest of the week. Everyone have a nice rest of your week. Bye.